everyone on this Wednesday, August 19th. This is the 9th episode of the Deep Water MMA Podcast. I'm your host, Northrup, and I'm joined by my co-host, most of the time, as always, Lucas Grandsire. What's up, Lucas?
Hey, what's going on, man? Listen, I got to tell the people, though, this is historic. This is the last time you're going to see this background, the old-timey crap behind me, the clearly at my grandparents' house setting. It's over, man. The last episode in France, like next thing you know, will be in the U.S. of A. So soak it in, people. This is a historic moment.
I'm mad we're losing the title of like international show.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I am French. I have a French passport. Like, if we need to wave that thing around, we'll wave it around. Like, we'll make it happen. I do whatever it takes.
All right. And similar to last week with James Lynch, we have it all MyMMANews team here. John Eric Poli, kind enough to join us. What's up, John? How you doing?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on. And, Lucas, I want to, bring up, too, you're talking about your background there. This background here, it'll still be here for a little while, but I'm in the process, the early stages of getting my own little home studio going on. I have a vision in my head, but it's more like, remember when Dana White first said, I'm going to build an octagon on an island, we're going to have Fight Island, and everyone's like, how the hell are we going to do that? That's kind of what this is like. Like there's a game plan in place, but there's not a single anything that's laid out. But in time, there will be a John Eric Poli studio for all of this.
Right. So it's so funny you say that, because I'm working on the same thing. I have this vision, like, I want this wooden table. Like, I want a similar setup to the Joe Rogan experience. I'm looking at cameras and shit, but all of it's expensive though. So it's like I'm thinking about it, I'm looking about it, and then it's like, you got to actually buy that crap. So, but it's gonna happen too, man. All these studios are coming together.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned with the cameras too. I've actually just been shooting off my iPhone, because a lot of the iPhones shoot better quality than like a lower end camera. Now, when you go your higher end camera, of course, you're gonna have better video on those. So what I have envisioned, I want to have like a little desk in front of me. I'll use my iPhone to shoot some of it, the computer for some of it. Try to mix some camera angles up during all of it. So we'll see what happens. The vision's definitely there, but it's a process.
Yes, sir.
I'm just picturing.
Studio. Where's your studio, Connor? Well, what's going on?
I got this nice blue wall here. I mean, I feel like I can upgrade this. I do have some plans. I want to put like shelves here and put like some things up, put some pictures up.
Just like every other media member, you got to put the book because you're worldly.
Yeah, but then if you look closely, it's all like Dr. Seuss and
yeah, it's like the fuck are those books? Like, don't look at them.
Is that Captain Underpants? Like,
what the hell, man? Is that your kid's bookshelf? No, it's like, hey, man, it's a bookshelf.
But I just picture John like in the middle of the street doing like a Cynthia like Cavillo thing with like he has like the table and like he has to move the table like when the cars are coming down the street. He's like, can't you see him like shooting here?
Can you imagine that? Just do an interview like just live like right in the streets of my hometown. There's like cars going by, people are honking at me like, yo, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, you're ruining my interview.
yeah, you have to be a real dick about it. Like, hey, man, I'm trying to shoot.
Oh, man. But, guys, I mean, we got a lot to talk about, nothing short to talk about. I mean, how about this news cycle the last couple of days? We had all the stuff that happened this past Saturday, but then Monday, too, was so weird because I remember Monday I was kind of sitting around just, like, looking for something to cover. Nothing was happening. I do my interview. While I'm doing the interview, I just go on Twitter real quick, and I see about John Jones, and I'm like, oh, my God. Like, here we go. So, and then since then, just seems like a lot has happened. I saw like, Anderson Silva's got his fight with Uriah Hall. What were some other big ones? We saw Korean Zombie or Ortega. I mean, just a lot of big announcements. But for the Reyes and Blachowicz too. Yeah,
I'd say of course Reyes and Blachowicz too. That's going to be for the World Lightweight Light Heavyweight Championship now too. They made that official late last night. So that's an exciting match coming up too.
Yeah, I know it's like so much happening.
Yeah, you know what's like the crazy thing about the last couple of days is. Like, especially like looking at like some of this John Jones stuff, which I'm sure we're going to get into in a little bit. But I remember on Saturday night, I was listening to Dana White's post-fight interview, and he said, John Jones is interested. There's some talks going on there, but Francis Ngannou's next. And I even wrote that article then for MyMMANews on Sunday morning from Dana's post-fight interview saying that, Francis Ngannou's next. All of a sudden, like, the John Jones is vacating the belt. You have Blachowicz and that coming up. Of course, we just have the Silva stuff, and all of a sudden it's like what just happened on Sunday seems so long ago. So these busy news weeks are fun, a lot of work for us in our industry, but it's somehow that something happened only 3-4 days ago seems like it get lost in translation. Isn't it crazy how that works?
No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, it's whatever I like too. I'm like thinking about like how we want to start the show too. I usually will always bring up like what happened this past weekend, but then I was like, I'm like, that just seems so far ago. I was like, I'm never going to talk about that because like the John Jones stuff, like as much as like you still want to talk about that stuff from Saturday, I mean, a lot of this stuff does kind of trump that because, we're in a day and age now where it's, news now. So it's pretty crazy. But one thing I do like want to talk to you guys too. And I know, John, like you've actually I'm glad we started talking about studios because it's like a perfect segue. But like I know you just start really doing like a lot more interviews than you were doing in the past. I know Lucas, I mean, he's been doing interviews for a while now too. And I feel like as far as like video, I still feel like I'm still pretty kind of new to that. Like I used to always just do it like with like my recorder, things like that in person, that kind of thing. So even just like doing it as far as like online and being filmed is like new for me. But like for you guys too, and just, obviously this is like a show where we talk more about like the reporting side of things, but I feel like all of us kind of come from like different media backgrounds and, there's always like, I feel like certain like mistakes that we all make and things like that. So like, what are some of those things or maybe biggest learning curves, biggest mistakes that you guys had when you first started kind of conducting interviews? And we'll start with John.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll go back to my TV side. I remember, and thank God I was only covering like a high school girls volleyball, doing like a feature story on a team because when I first started out, I wasn't allowed to have so I would use a stick mic like I am now. Now, a lot of these mics have, and I'll pull it up here, you can see a cord, which is used then for you, obviously to plug into the camera, and that's how you get your sound out of it. So I wasn't at that point because I was just starting out. They wouldn't let me take the wireless stuff out until I got more advanced. And I came back to go and do this story. Didn't have any audio because for whatever reason, I don't know if the plug was screwed up or if I didn't have it plugged in the right way. But of course, that's how you get better and how you do things. But on a more recent end of it, thank God I wasn't doing this interview live. I was doing an interview with Daniel Schwain before his fight for the Contender Series. And I wanted to capture my end of things off of my iPhone as compared to just capturing, both our ends in Skype off of a split screen. So I was worried about somebody calling me or something. So I put my phone on airplane mode, which is one of the only times I remember to do it before doing an interview. I don't know what the hell happened, but my screen was black. I still had the audio there, but my part of it when I went to go lay it out was black. So I had to go and re-record myself asking these questions without anybody being there. It was so weird. It was a pain to edit, but it's when you do things like that though, I always look at it as a learning experience and how you get better.
Yeah, that's something you don't tell us, John. You re-record the thing and then act like it never happened.
It's all part of the industry, behind the scenes, ladies and gentlemen. That's how it's done.
How about you, Lucas?
Oh man, you guys have an hour just for all the stupid shit that I've done. I'll get you started with this. The first ever interview I did was for Bellator. They sent out the emails like, do you guys want phone calls with stuff? So and I don't tell the story too often, but since this is the show, we're talking about the media. So I asked for 3 names: Kevin Casey, Andre Korshkov, and Brendan Ward. So I'd never done an interview before, and so they send me. They're like, all right, your first interview is Brendan Ward. So I write down my questions, and so the interview time comes, and I'm in France, so it's like midnight. I'm sweating all over. I'm pacing back and forth. I was like, do you want to be a fucking reporter? If you want to do it, you got to do these interviews. I'm shaking. They call me up. And so, I'm like, all right, cool. I have my questions. I was Brennan's last interview of the day. So, start off typical shit. Like, how do you like the matchup? How this fight come together? And he just came off his fight against Paul Daly where he got gadoosh, knocked the fuck out, right? So I asked, how did your last fight affect your confidence? Big pause. And I was like, all right. And the other guy on the phone, Dan, he goes, hey, Dan, yo, fuck this guy. Hangs up on me. And I'm sitting there like,
ooh.
I was like, oh, no. And then I hear, the Bellator guy, Dan's being polite. Hello, are you still there, Brendan? Come on, man. Just told me to get fucked. Like, no. So I'm sitting, I'm sweating. I'm like, oh, my, your first ever interview and you fuck it up. Like, this is my life story. You do something for the first time, you fuck it up every time. So, he was really nice about it, though. Dan was like, man, he had a lot of interviews, a little bit sensitive about it. It's my fault. So first ever interview, I was like, all right, you got to think about your damn questions. Like, no, how do you feel? Like what did you learn from your last loss if they got knocked the fuck out? And you leave it there. Because after that one, it's like that one, every other interview, you're sweating. And good thing I had guys like Kevin Casey were a great interview. But yeah, for that first ever interview, first ever mistake, and it was a big one.
Have you ever interviewed him afterwards?
Hell no. That's, there's some interviews like Tanner Bozer where the first time he yelled at me and I fucked up. I was like, it's my fault. So let me interview him again and fix that. But with Brendan, I was like, I'm not going to fix that. You were a dick. I was scared. Like, no, what's my incentive to try to interview him again? Plus, I have to be professional. not have bias when I talk to these guys. And there's always going to be that thing in the back of my mind, like, this guy told me to get fucked. So I don't necessarily want to talk to him again. And that was just, just a decision I made. Like, it just, I try to, I popped my cherry with Brandon Ward for, interviewing fighters, and it went really bad. So, no, for me, there was no incentive to talk to him again.
I feel like your experience is like similar to mine too, because like I feel like one thing that like when I was first doing it too, it's like obviously like a lot of it was like you watching and learn, right? Like so I would watch different guys do it, and then kind of just like try to copy that, and obviously have my own material and things like that. But like what you were saying too is just like I felt like with me the biggest thing in the beginning was just like getting over like those awkward things, because like sometimes you'll ask a question and maybe you don't get like the answer you were expecting, or a guy reacts way differently than you expect a thing. And like you have to be able to handle that. And I think that's what I like failed at in the beginning too, is like a lot of times awkward things would happen, and you had that awkward silence sometimes too. And you just like, you kind of like go with it. But like, I feel like now I'm like a lot more comfortable with that. Cause like, I think I told John this story already, but I had done an interview with Roy Nelson. I mean, just so happens he's fighting this weekend too. But this was like when he was like still like on his rise up in the UFC and everything. But even that, like when I was interviewing him, that was like my first, I guess, like one of my bigger interviews. And I mean, this was back in like 2011, 2012. But like even then it was like, I was like super nervous, everything like that. But then like once you were actually like in it, it was just like the way he was like answering questions and stuff. It was very like short answers. Like you couldn't say like a lot to it. It was like a lot of it was just like like jokes. And like I'm all for like laughing and stuff like in my interviews, but it was to the point where like I couldn't like add anything to it. Like I got to this point where in my head I'm like, I can't like react to these things. So, like I almost don't even know what he's like talking about. And it was just like so awkward that you're almost like praying for it to be over. You're like, I'm just hoping that. And so like that was kind of like awkward. And like now I wish that I would get like an interview like that. Like again, like because I think I could now. I'm a little more skilled. I mean, I went to school after that, obviously. So like I feel much more prepared, and I have a lot more experience behind me than that too. And I think nothing's like that was like over the phone too. Nothing's worse than like doing that stuff in person.
Oh, yeah.
I say one of the things in person, too, I could recall one of the first ever really big people that I ever interviewed. So, well, let me put it this way. So when I first started my career out, when I was just interning, I was more just going out and, you interview people. It's not on the air and you're not standing side by side of one another. And we would come back and we would put together, like a news piece, which is similar. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll probably see like the Cynthia Calvillo piece that you referenced before. It's like more like a newsier type of a piece. So I did mostly that. I went to a different station where, I did some work on the anchor desk, but still we were throwing it to mostly those types of stories and conducting those types of stories. When more recent job that I had, it was more in studio, side by side doing interviews. So this interview was with Major Harris, and Major Harris is a college football Hall of Famer. He was a Heisman Trophy runner-up at West Virginia. They played it for the national championship the one year, but he was coming to the area that I was working in to do a football camp with kids. So I was interviewing about the camp, and it was the first time like me ever interviewing somebody in that type of setting. And I was so nervous about my transitions from question to question. So when I went back and listened to my interview, it was always like, I would be like, oh, so Major, tell me about this camp and, why you're going to be here. And then he would answer. Then I go, okay. And then ask whatever the next question I had written down. Every transition was okay. And ask question. So I had to get better.
Mine at one point was and so. And so every time like, and so, like, your brain forgets that, like, you need to say other shit. And then, yeah. But
then, of course, like I was going to say there, as you get comfortable doing it too, it just kind of, you knock it off, you're more, things just flow more naturally. Next thing you know, you're busting balls with Matt Mitrione about baking cupcakes and cookies instead of, worrying about what your next question is going to be.
Yeah, I feel like those words too. Like, I mean, like, I feel like even like you watch like guys that are way higher than us, things like that. Like you do catch those words though, because I think everyone does have those words that like I said, it's like that fear of like that awkward silence. Like you fill that in with that, and like you see that I think even some of the higher ones. I just think they don't say as much. You don't notice it as much. But like another thing I want to talk to you guys about too, and I don't know, like, if you guys experience this, but I know it's, like, something I used to do, and I really noticed it today because me and John just got back from the Bellator Media Day. We were doing that, so one thing I just noticed a lot is, like, just people asking questions just to ask a question. And I feel like that's something that, like, I definitely was, I think, guilty of, like, in the beginning, too. But I think that would be like if I was to like give advice to like anybody that was like just getting into this or something. Like, yeah, just don't ask a question, just like ask it. Like, it should have a purpose. Like, you should be building up to those tougher questions, obviously. But yeah, I just felt like today there was a lot of like just asking questions, just to ask questions. And for me, it was like frustrating because like I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I haven't gone yet. And there's like only, especially in those kind of things, you only have a certain amount of time. So you're taking precious time from like the rest of us when you're asking a question of like, I mean, I'm not going to say like what the guy asked or who asked it, but just say like, I'm trying to think of like examples. Like they would just be like, like you're wearing that t-shirt. How is that t-shirt affecting you like during fight week? And it's just like, what does that, like, that has nothing to do with like the fight itself. And like, I just like thought like, and that just made me like think about this. I'm like, I'm glad we're talking about interviews because that was something that I just saw there. Like, have you guys experienced like that? Have you caught yourselves, especially in the beginning stages, kind of maybe just asking questions, just kind of ask questions?
Yeah, it's funny. In my background, I had a more of an issue of I used to ask like way too many questions when I go out and do interviews. I would come back, not having more than enough is usually better than having less. But like I would sometimes like things would have to be definitely stupid that I would ask, and like now I have more of myself of like a pretty steady flow of like what's best for the story, how this is going to transition perfectly, as compared to. I guess you'd say like that, just asking to ask. I would say there were a lot better questions than some of the things that we've heard. That's for sure. But yeah, no, I mean, what I've usually tried to do is, and I learned this, I remember one of my professors in college, a big mentor, told us this in class. He said, you don't have to go out there and ask the obvious question because somebody's going to do that. So, a lot of times when I would go out to fights, what I would try to do is try to not necessarily catch them off guard, sort of say, but think of something unique that no one is going to ask them. Like, for example, Caitlin Chukagian, for example. Michael Bisping did a big piece on his podcast about how Caitlin Chukagian didn't pay her bar tab and Bisping got stuck with it. So it worked out perfectly. There I am at it was UFC Philly. And, everybody's asking like, oh, where are you at in the rankings? You think you're getting a title fight? The typical things that you would ask Caitlin Chukagian. So I get the last question of the day, and I get to ask her about that. Next thing you know, it's this whole big thing. Everybody's laughing at it. MMA Junkie shared it. It had like, I forget, a ridiculous. I think over 1 million views on their Instagram channel. Like, so I usually try to go for things like that. That this way, it's even though it's different, and I want to get this question in there, and I know I'm going to be able to get it in. At least it's entertaining, and you're going to want to hear about it.
Right. That's the thing is you have to pick the appropriate setting. Like if you're in I guess you guys were doing it over Zoom and everybody gets to ask questions, like you have to be respectful of the other person, understand what's the purpose of that. The purpose of that isn't like, oh, you're wearing a Metallica shirt. Do you like them? Who gives a shit? That's not the time. Like the fighter's cutting weight. They're thinking about the fight. You have to pick the appropriate setting. If I have a sit down with a guy for 15 minutes, I might be able to butter him up by mentioning his shirt that's Metallica. I'm going to want to throw those, like Vicente Luque today. I talked to him and, sort of throw a fun question out there that sort of caught him off guard. I was like, listen, you do Brazil, you do USA. What do you do for phone number wise? Do you switch? Like, if I'd asked him that in a scrum, you'd be like, what the fuck? Who gives a shit? Like, who cares about that? But, those questions like that are really for trying to, I guess, score points a little bit, create that relationship. But when you're doing a thing over Zoom, when you're in a press conference and, there's a topic, you're there for a reason. You're not there to, how do you think your shirt's going to affect you in a fight? It's not because I'm going to take that shit out before I walk in the cage. Like, I feel like it's reporters that want to score points with the fighters, right? But when the guy's cutting weight and he's just like, all right, can you guys hurry up so I can get it over with? Ask him a stupid ass question that doesn't have anything to do with the fight. You're not going to score those points. And, Bellator, I don't know who asked the question. I wasn't there, but Bellator, they give credentials to everybody. So it can be good for some of the, especially us when we're coming up. But then you get to a point where you have some dudes that are asking like, last night we saw you had rice for dinner. How does that make you feel? Like you end up with guys like that. And it's just like, man, you're going to make everybody else look like shit when you do stuff like that.
I think there's like a difference too, because like what I was kind of saying with like the whole like a t-shirt question or things like that, like it's different than like John asking at the end of an interview, like at the end of a post-fight scrum about like the beer tab, because like they teach you this like day one, like in media school, like you want to like have the things that, you want to produce content that's going to be like, oh, I want to read that. And like, if I'm seeing a thing about like Lucas was kind of saying too, like find the right timing, like, but like, if you're in like a post-fight scrum too, like no one's going to be talking after that this guy wore this like same shirt. Like, the guy wore a shirt one day, a blue shirt on, the media scrum day. It's like, but they are going to be talking about the time Caitlin Schiggen like left the bar tab from like Michael Bisping.
Exactly.
Why? Because one, it's Michael Bisping. Two, it's Caitlin Schiggen. And it's hilarious. Like, it's funny.
And relevant.
Yeah, and he like humanizes the fighters too, which I think is like something that everyone can be like, oh, I remember the time that, and then like they're gonna look into that because they're like, oh, this is hilarious. Like, I wonder like what happened, where did it happen, that kind of thing. So
but the
like
other
that
thing is, no, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say like the other thing that showed that John did really well was like he was the last question. So everybody already asked that shit. Like, what do you do? And you pull out the story, and everybody gets to click. So just like you mentioned, Connor, it's about that timing too, and no one wants to ask certain things.
Yeah, because and it's right too. Like you want to ask questions too that are gonna stand out because like John was saying too, you don't want to waste your questions on something everyone's gonna ask. And like one example that like I think here in every single interview I listen to, whether it's like one-on-one and scrums, everyone asks, what has your training been like during COVID-19? Everybody asks it. It's just a question that like everyone's been asking, and like it makes sense. Like I totally get why you asked that, but like if you are in like a media scrum scenario, like don't ask that question because it's gonna be asked. I heard it today. I think in almost every interview I did. I don't know if I actually heard it in Bader's, but I think everyone else. Oh, actually no, I think I did. So I think in every interview, like I heard that question.
One of the things that makes our job tough too is like a situation like today is at least it's one big press conference. But I remember when I covered with a TV station, I used to get credentialed to the UFC event. I know we don't have that luxury right now. Hopefully in the future, maybe one day we will. But I was out in Vegas for International Fight Week. It just happened. I think I told the story the last time when I was on your guys' podcast. I was able to get credentials. I was out there for vacation. And anyway, I went and covered the fight. So I was at Media Day, and it was Luke Rockhold's first fight at 205 pounds. He was moving up. It was when he lost to John Blachowicz there. But I went up to Luke Rockhold and I asked him about, what's it like being able to fight at 205 pounds and not have to cut that extra weight? Do you feel much better? Great, fair question, great question. The only problem is by the time I get to Luke Rockhold, how many times he's probably been asked that question, and he was a little rude with me. I was not happy with that experience, but I get it from his point of view. But when we're in scrums like that, it makes our job hard because we all have jobs that we have to do. And unfortunately for the fighters, they're getting asked the same questions a lot of times. So if you ever have the opportunity to, not have to be that person that asks the same question 100 different times, I usually try to be that person that's not going to ask that question. So I stand out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that too, it all falls almost like on the fighter too. I think some fighters are trained better than others as far as like dealing with the media and handling like those questions. Like I think a lot of like managers will say, listen, you're going to get asked this question. Just, pretty much just give the same answer. Cause like there's a lot of times you'll watch multiple interviews on a fighter and it almost seems like you're watching that same interview because they literally do almost word for word the same answer because they're just so used and trained, I think, to answering certain ones like that. And maybe they won't get like pissed off or something like Luke Rockhold did or something like that. But another thing I did want to go in with you guys real quick too, I think that's kind of like important too, because I don't know, I kind of want to build this around like people that maybe are like just getting started and stuff. Because like I know when I first started, like I would love something like this where I'm hearing some maybe younger guys who are kind of maybe just a little further than I am and just kind of talking about like their experiences and stuff. But one thing I did want to go into too is like, how have you guys kind of dealt with, and maybe just over the past couple, like I know John, like you started doing more interviews more recently, but like for you guys, like how have you kind of worked on like building those relationships with fighters and managers? And we'll start with John.
Yeah, I would say for me, I'm actually still in like the very beginning stages of it, so I'm still trying to figure it out a little bit. For the most part, though, I think it's kind of like anything else. I think it's about that personal one-on-one contact a lot of times. That is how it works at best. I guess to give you like one personal example, I think that fitting here, me and Mickey Gall have a very good relationship, which actually came through Eric running our website. Mickey was cornering somebody, Chris Cataldo, at a regional show close by to me, and Eric happened to be on the broadcast team for that event. So Eric was like, "Oh, do you want to come back and meet Mickey?" And I was like, "Sure." I actually interviewed him at Mickey had just fought at UFC Newark, and he had a win there, and I got to meet Mickey, and we had a little brief conversation because I knew that Mickey did some training up by my way. So anyway, we went back, and Mickey remembered me from that, but me and Mickey had a very good conversation, and we hit it off from there. So we've been able to stay in close contact. So if you have that opportunity to make a one-on-one type of connection like that, a lot of times is usually the best way to go. But it's all about what I think though is just being a professional and being a stand-up, individual, and not pissing the people off, not being too annoying, and going about it that way. But again, I don't have many contacts. I feel like you guys, have a lot more than I do. You guys are in touch with some managers and stuff like that, which is, the best way to go. A lot of my interviews have come through Eric's, connections, because Eric will say to us like, hey guys, so-and-so's available for an interview next Tuesday, who can do it? And that's mostly I've been doing a lot of my interviews recently. But again, I think the best way is just to be professional, in every step of the way to get these type of interviews.
If anyone's wondering too, Eric is Eric Colwell, who's the editor at MyMMANews too, just to let everyone know. But Lucas, what about you?
It's kind of a difficult question because obviously, like, you hear of a lot of guys that'll say like, oh, I just texted so-and-so and we talked about this. Like, the things, I'm very young too. So I have to make sure I put an extra emphasis on professionalism when I talk to these guys. So, I started doing interviews. I was maybe like 19. So it's like, you can't just be like that kid that's in their messages and their DMs and all that shit. So I don't really talk to fighters that much outside of like scheduling interviews and stuff. And even for managers, what I like to do is I like to make my work speak for itself. Like, that if you do an interview with me, like, listen, Luke is going to, maybe take 10, 15 minutes of your time. He's going to ask relevant questions. There's no tricks in there. Like, I come off like, I think I'm very genuine. And so that's what I do is I let my work speak for itself. Like, it's not often that I have a guy say they didn't like doing an interview. And usually I'm able to get guys on more than once. So, for me, managing relationships is just about, I think, not being too greedy as well. Like, for example, if I talk to a fighter before a fight, if they win, I'm probably not going to reach out to them post-fight just because I don't want to be that guy that's like interviewing you before or after. There are guys like Sadiq Yusuf where we get along really well if you're watching the camera on our videos because we're both immigrants. So I always kind of use that angle. But the big thing with him is we have that understanding of, when he wins a fight, then we'll do an interview. But out of respect for sort of, because he told me once, he's like, let's just do an interview after the fight, like usual champ. He called me champ, like, got to make it work. But no, it's for me, I let the interview speak for itself. Like, what you're getting with me, that I'm going to be professional. And, I have a hard time sort of texting these guys outside of any kind of interviews. I don't really know what to say. Like, hey man, how's training camp going? Like, I'm sure his aunt was asking him that same question. So, for me, it's about professionalism and, just doing the best I can to sort of be predictable. And obviously you don't want to ruffle any feathers, but you don't want to stop that from doing your job either.
Yeah, Lucas, one of the things I like that you said there too is like you said, like your interviews are like 10, 15 minutes. I feel like that's a big one too. And I try to do the same thing. I mean, sometimes you get a good stuff out of some people. I think when I interviewed Dustin Jacoby the other week after his big win, that one went a little bit longer, which was around 17 minutes. Sometimes you have good stuff, you let it go. But sometimes, a lot of people I've noticed get in too much of a repetition of, they want to ask a COVID question and then one COVID question turns into they've asked now 6 of them. You spent 20 minutes just on COVID and they're starting to repeat themselves. So yeah, I think it's about having that variety, mixing things up and pretty much getting yourself in and out with the fighters too, because they don't, they're being gracious with their time. They don't want to be spending, an hour on the phone with us, Yeah.
Well, let me put this way. It's funny you mentioned that because I've seen, no names obviously, but I'm sure some people know who I'm talking about. But there are some guys that during their interviews, they talk too damn much. Like the interview is like 45 minutes because you spent 10 minutes asking your questions. Like I feel like, when you do the interview, you have to understand that the star is the fighter. Like, nobody really gives a shit about it. Like you're not Joe Rogan. I can't like bring on a guy and it's about me just as much as it is about my guest. So, that's why the time, it's important to manage it and sort of, there's some interviews that run long, right? Like it gets good. We talk about good stuff, but that's also where you want to condense it in. All right. So you start to get towards 10 minutes, like, all right, what's important? What do we need to talk about? What could wait for another time? So yeah, the time I think is super important and making sure these guys don't hate you because if they don't necessarily love doing interviews and you keep them for 30 minutes, then, they're not going to be sure they want to do that again.
And so one more thing too is we'll go to the John Poli School of Journalism here. You always want to ask, and I see people sometimes make this mistake as well, but you always want to start off by asking the more recent stuff. So if you're going to talk to, we use Ryan Bader because he's fighting on Friday night. We just did the media day with him. We'll use him by example. You're going to start off by asking Ryan about his upcoming fight, what he thinks of his opponent, how is training camp, that type of stuff before you want to get into anything else. I see a lot of times where people start asking all these other questions. And next thing you know, you're 20 minutes into your interview and you haven't even asked the question that's on everybody's mind is about this upcoming matchup. So it's always important that you ask those questions first before you getting into your other stuff there.
Yeah. But see, I think that's what's different too about like scrums too, because in scrums you don't really have that luxury. You kind of you have to ask the questions you want to ask right away. So a lot of that time too, I feel like you're kind of almost, it goes kind of a little bit against that. But I think what you guys said too, it's like there's a time and place for everything, I think, and like there are interviews too where like you feel it. It's almost like if you're just talking with you guys, like if you have a conversation that's flowing and that kind of thing. In my head, I'll say to myself, all right, like I don't care if this runs longer than like 15, 20 minutes because like I can just tell too that guy's like enjoying the conversation or that fighter's enjoying the conversation just because you read body language and that kind of thing. You can tell when that kind of thing too. And like I said, you always want to almost like build your questions too. So a lot of times I think you do that too because like Lucas said, if the guy's kind of hung up on one question and it's going longer, you can kind of maybe like weed out those middle questions that you have in your head that you want to ask and be like, all right, well, I know I want to get to these ones. So if it took him, 10 minutes to talk about how he's feeling right now, I probably should ask these other questions pretty damn quick because, you don't want to have the guy there till, the next day. So, I think there's a fine balance. And I think you only get that with just doing it more and just the practitioner of it all.
Yeah, and I would say the thing with experience too comes in where a lot of times you'll have questions, and when you're first doing it, you're so focused on like, oh no, I need to ask my next question, and you're like trying to think in your head, how am I going to phrase this question? And then you don't listen to the person that you're interviewing. So there's times when you first start, you'll ask them a question, and they'll give you a long answer where they may have, like you said, Connor, answered maybe something that you have down the line, and you don't have to ask that anymore. But when you're first starting, you get so nervous that you don't even realize that they already answered your, question that you have 4 questions down the line. So as you get experience, things slow down. You're able to listen to the fighters a little bit more. And, when you're able to listen and then things slow down, you have better conversations as well.
Yeah, I can't count the many times I was like 18 years old and I would like transcribe an interview and I realized I asked they said the same answer like 3 times just because like in my head I'd be like nervous or something and I'm not paying attention that they had just like pretty much said that. And then I asked a question to follow up on that, but they already told me it.
It's funny you mentioned that because I had a fighter I was talking to Amanda Bobby Cooper, and I guess fighters love dunking on me, especially when I started. But I asked her, I was like, what are your thoughts on your opponent? And so because, at the time I was writing articles, so it's kind of like I used that, and then I used the matchup stuff to sort of form my story. So then I was like, what are your thoughts on your opponent? Then after that, I was like, so what do you think of the matchup? I feel like I already answered that. And, I was in front of the phone like, oh, shit. It already said well, now I don't want to ask you questions anymore because you already answered them. Some fighters, they'll tell you straight up, like Tanner Bozer, I know I talk about him a lot. He will call you out on all that shit. So, you got to be on your game with some of these questions.
Yeah, one of the things I like to do too is I always ask a fighter before every single interview. I always ask them these 2 questions. Is there anything specifically that you want me to ask during this interview so you get that point across? And then I also ask them, is there anything you don't want me to ask? And usually for the first question, it's always the same thing of, well, I'm an open book, ask whatever you want. But there are times, though, if you're talking to a fighter about an upcoming fight, they'll say, don't ask me what my game plan is because I don't want to talk about it. So that, which is usually your thing of, so if you have that question on there of, and that's the other thing too, is about how you word the questions. And from dealing with this now, is I just pretty much try to avoid that. I'll ask them like, oh, so you've been in camp, you've studied your opponent. What do you see out of him in your review of him? Instead of saying, so how do you see yourself getting the win? Because a lot of fighters don't want to talk about that. So again, that's all part of the trade.
Just to kind of maybe cap it off here, anything that you guys like in this topic of interviews and that kind of thing, anything you want to like add before we move on to some of the hot topics?
Yeah, this is a hot topic though. Do you want to do hot topics? Do you want me to wait? I'm sorry, I just got very excited when you said there's anything you guys want to add. I do have something I want to add.
Look, go for it, John.
Do you know that we've been talking for over a half hour now and nobody mentioned that it was Ioana and Jacek's birthday yesterday? I mean, happy birthday, Ioana. Come on, guys. How do we not? That should have been the hot topic of the weekend, or the week so far.
I already told John that in one of my interviews on Monday, I actually blanked on her name. And I was like, oh, who's that? I was like, oh, Ioana. I was like, how did I forget her name? But it was so funny that because actually in that interview, 2 minutes later, the fighter forgot what he was saying. And then somebody in the background was like yelled it to him. And I was like, I need that. I need somebody in the back that can be there and be like, Ioana. And I'm like, oh, Ioana.
In case nobody has realized, Joanna's my favorite fighter, and I can have complete media bias in anything that's Joanna related, and I would just come straight out. I didn't have a problem admitting that. You want to go ahead and call media bias? Yeah, there is. I have it. Only with her. Everyone else I'm fair, but she's on the pedestal. I don't care.
Well, she's not a fighter anymore, man. She's retired. So, I mean, I guess you're talking about some figure that we used to see back in the, it's not a fighter. Like, that makes it okay. That's why we didn't mention her birthday, because we were like, you're not a fighter anymore, so not really relevant.
She's going to fight again. Well, did I miss this retirement announcement somewhere? I'm always on top of everything. When did
you didn't see a retirement announcement? And she put something on Instagram saying she was retired. Yeah, come on. You call yourself a fan. What are you doing, man?
Apparently I missed this in all the interviews I've been doing recently. As soon as we get off this phone, I'm checking this out right now.
I was gonna say, yeah, like for just the time being, if you want, John, we'll give you permission. You can check on Instagram right now.
I'm checking it out right now. You guys hold the fort down. I have some business to attend to.
There you go, guys. Up in a suit and tie, doesn't even know his favorite fighter is retired. What is this, man? Thank you for backing me up, Connor, because I started doubting myself. Like, nah, you call yourself a fan?
But and that's like another thing too, just for kind of, I guess, almost like I feel like we're going full circle here. But I was talking in the beginning about like awkward moments. Like that could have been like a super awkward moment, like in the interview the other day where I'm blanking on this like famous fighter's name. Like, but like sometimes it happens. You have a brain fart, you can't help it. It happens. And like with that, it's like I made a joke of it. Like, he goes and does that. I was like, I need what you got, like, that kind of thing. So, and again, I like when you can almost like humanize the fighters. So I feel like a lot of times they get put on these pedestals where like they're not equal to us, but really, I mean, hindsight, I mean, they're more probably closer to us than you might think.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the awkward moments, like, and I'm fine talking about it because whatever, like, if you can't laugh at yourself, like, if you look at my interview with Chris Gutierrez, like, the first thing you'll notice is, it's half the length of all my other interviews, and the thing is, it kind of got awkward fast because it felt like he came into that interview and all he wanted to talk about was that the draw was bullshit. So every time I try to direct a question his way, it'd be like one word, and it gets awkward quick because you realize, like, it's a game you're playing. I'm asking you questions. You try to give me a little spiel. But, if you don't play that game back and forth, it gets awkward quick. And, you mentioned like, oh, you want to get this interview over with. Like this one, I was like, okay, clearly he's not trying to play the game. I asked the essential questions. Like, I was like, I'm going to go ahead and cut it at 7 minutes because, this isn't going to lead anywhere. And it was starting to get awkward because you're trying to find questions and he's not playing that game with you. So, yeah, it's funny you mentioned awkward moments because it still happens today, even after all this time.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to go just to kind of go along with that too. I think also like, I mean, this is different than your scenario, but I think another thing too, we were kind of talking about the length of interviews too. Like, I also don't think like, don't be afraid if like interview goes fast. Cause there's plenty of times where like I've been in an interview where I feel like I'm asking a person a lot of questions, but it's like, and they're giving great answers, but some people just like, I feel like they're like, It's almost like a skill. Like they just cut right to it. Right. And there's not much to follow up on, but like it's not like they're just giving you yes or no. Like they'll give you like educated answers, but they're just straight to the point, quick. Like Alex Perez is like a good example of that. Every time I interview Alex Perez, he's very straight to the point, that kind of thing. And the interviews kind of go rather quickly. So sometimes I'll try to maybe build up a little more in my arsenal as far as like questions and things I want to ask. But for the most part, I think sometimes you just have those fighters too. Like I think Joe Selecki's kind of very similar to that too. But me and Joe usually have kind of longer ones, but even with him too, I think he's very, very straight to the point and things like that. And that's nothing to be like afraid of too. Cause I remember like when that first happened to me, I was like, oh my God, like this is going so fast. What do I do? But then it's really not as bad as it may seem.
No, you know what the worst is? The worst is, let me throw this out there. The worst is Henry Corrales. I came in with 12 questions. The interview lasted 3 minutes, 30 seconds. So you want like who's the worst? It's Henry. Like even his nickname is boring. It's like, okay. Like that should be, yeah.
This is not, we don't want to bash fighters here.
No. But that's his interview style he gives you boring answers because he doesn't like to do them. That's not bashing. That's just the truth. You could ask him, he'd tell you. Yeah. All right, John, what you got for us, John?
Well, first off, she posts so many stuff that this is probably why I missed. I still haven't found it because I'm trying to go through her Instagram. She posts like 3 photos a day, so it's like impossible. Apparently, I did Google it, and it happened like 4 weeks ago. Apparently, but I'm sorry, maybe even longer than that. Because 4 weeks ago, there was an article that Dan Lambert said that she's not retired. She's let me rephrase this. He doesn't believe she's retired. She wants a title fight. So if she doesn't get a title fight, she's just going to sit out and wait. And then if she doesn't get one, then we'll probably never see her ever again.
So she's retired. Just say that, John.
Sad face.
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked though if she got like a rematch with like Wei Li. Like,
yeah, I'm all for that. I
think that fight.
Yeah, John.
Not to mention that Rose has a broken nose, and God knows how long she's going to be out with that. She only fights once every 13 months to begin with, anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
All right.
That's devastating news. Now, thanks for ruining my day, guys.
Now, you come on this podcast just for like a chill talk, and we go right for the heart, man. We don't mess around on here. You entered the deep water.
And the thing about it is like every time that she, I don't know, loses, somebody calls her a bully, any sort of negative headline, people bust my balls till no end about it. And nobody said anything. You know what I mean? Like, I'm finding out now 4 weeks later.
Sorry, man.
Jeez.
Everything John thought was real in his life.
No wonder why she doesn't want to do an interview with me.
John's never going to be able to come on the show again because he's going to be in therapy after this.
Yeah, I forgot. I was gonna, get off of here, eat dinner, and go right to the gym. But I think I might need to check myself into a hospital now. I'm a little devastated.
Yeah,
I'll still eat dinner though, because I am hungry. After that, though, we'll get it straightened out after that.
Yeah, he didn't lose his appetite, but he it's definitely devastating.
Just a little broken heart. That's all.
There you go. But let's move on to. Are we all ready to move on to the hot topics now?
I don't know, man. John, you want to log off?
I don't know. I don't know. I tried to bring up a hot topic the last time, and it backfired on me. So I'll let you guys bring it this time. I'm not saying anything.
Did you guys hear Sean O'Malley retired? No, just kidding. That didn't happen. But we do want to talk about Sean O'Malley. What does this loss mean for O'Malley? Obviously had some little controversy, I think, around it. Now, some people, I think, are saying that maybe it wasn't as controversial as we all initially thought. But, for you guys, we'll start with John. What does this loss ultimately mean for O'Malley?
Well, first and foremost, I think it means that he has some type of problem with that ankle or that leg, whatever's going on there. And that has to be in the forefront right now, I think. I don't know whether that means seeing a specialist or seeing a different doctor than he has in the past, but that has to be cleared up because he can't just keep, having this happen every couple months or every couple fights, I should say. I know he had that suspension in the mix there, but anyway, I think that's first and foremost. But I mean, in the long terms of things, every fighter loses, and losing to Marlon Vera is not, the end of the world. It's not like he's a pushover by any means. Vera's a very talented fighter. He really should be on now a 6-fight win streak. He's going to be ranked. Definitely a bright future for him as well. So I don't think it's the end of the world. But if you saw my Matchmaker Monday piece this Monday when I said what's next for Sean O'Malley, it said heal up. That has to, right now, his health needs to be his full concern right now. And I don't want to see him go back inside of that octagon until we know exactly what the problem's going to be with this leg or his ankle, whatever the problem is there, and that it's fully taken care of and he can go in there at 100%.
Yeah, for me, this isn't something, I feel like this was like the best case scenario for not getting your stock like to hurt too much. Like, I know he's such like a big figure that people are waiting to shit on him. But for me, it's like, as soon as we saw his leg give out, at least when I saw it, I was like, okay, there's no way you can win. Like, I can appreciate you bouncing on one leg, but listen, if Marlon's a professional fighter and he knows what he's doing, it's over. Obviously he took that big elbow, so obviously it looks really bad in the highlights. But for me, I think the thing that I was worried the most about, and obviously John touched on it, but is the is he durable? Like, that's the second time we've seen him in the cage with a hurt leg. This time he had an opponent that had fight IQ, so it was a little bit different. But I'm questioning, though, what's his durability? Like, if we've seen it twice now. If we see it even more, like that's going to hurt his career more than anything else. So I'm definitely worried about that durability. I know Ben Askren told Ariel Helwani, like, he's I don't know if he used this word, but he's like, basically like a pussy for going out on a stretcher. Like, yeah. I don't know if you guys saw it, but in France, we see it on Fight Pass. We have no commercials, so we see everything. And when the doctors are checking on him, O'Malley's rolled over. He was screaming. I mean, he was in pain. Like, for me, the guy can't walk. Like, you can't fault him. Like, that means nothing. My question isn't as hard and stuff. It's that durability. It's how far can you really go if you can't take too much damage to the legs? It's not your fault you got hurt, but, it happened, and it's happened twice now.
Yeah. And Tim Welch, O'Malley's coach, actually already addressed that on Twitter, too. And he said that they were asking for him to walk out. He didn't want to take a stretcher. but they kind of forced him to do it. So it wasn't even like his choice. So I know they're kind of going after Askren, but that's a whole other thing. But hey, like for me, oh, go ahead.
I would say I just wanted to add with all this too. Is I saw a couple of people saying like, I understand that he was hurt, but that was still a quick stoppage. I thought it was a great stoppage because everyone watching it, and including the ref and both of those guys in there, knew that O'Malley's leg has had it and he can't stand up. So I think the ref was just, why let him take extra shots when he's not going to be able to continue and last. I thought it was a great stoppage by the ref, and I forget who the ref was in that moment, but kudos to whoever it was. Was it Dan Mergliata? Was it Herb Dean? Herb Dean? Yeah, well,
I think it was Herb Dean, yeah.
The last time I was on this podcast, Herb Dean had some controversy, and I said, whenever he does something right, nobody praises him, and now here we are praising him for his good work there. So kudos to Herb.
Yeah, I remember getting on Twitter and I see people saying like, early stop. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like the fighter clearly can't continue. Like he's eating shots. Whenever a guy falls down and then looks at his opponent, like, the deer in the headlights, for me, that made total sense. Like, I think people they want to see the guy like completely out cold so that they know for sure it's done. But, John mentioned it was a great stoppage. The guy can't get back up. He's eating shots. Stop the fight. Like for me, there was never in my mind was I thinking it's an early stoppage. Like I was like, yeah, you're getting pounded on. You're not getting back up unless Marlon wants you to. It was a great stoppage, and I think it was important to talk about that because how was there controversy? How was that a topic of was it early? That for me that was stupid. Like what was there to talk about?
I think my only argument to that, though, would be like we've already seen O'Malley have a foot injury and fight through it. So I think like with that kind of thing, that might have been like how some people were kind of looking at it too, though, being like, all right, he's on the ground. Like maybe he could actually like, because like those O'Malley diehards, I could see them totally being like, oh, maybe he could pull it out here like right now. Wouldn't that be like an O'Malley story? Like he is the guy that like could submit a guy with like a freaking broken foot or something.
Yeah, I think it was just the difference in level of competition there too. Because I think Vera was
because that was Andrei Sukhamath, I think.
But Vera in that situation, he landed a few he only threw about 2 heavy shots that landed before it got stopped. But I mean, he cracked them, 1 or 2 times there really hard, and it was only gonna continue. I think Vera had him in a really bad spot there, and it was only gonna get worse. And of course, like we said, O'Malley, everybody knew that his leg had given out and that he had some sort of problem there. So, again, probably good stoppage.
Yeah. My last thing on this too, Zach, because I don't think I actually gave my answer yet, but at first I thought it was like a very like lose-lose situation. Like when I first was watching it, I was like, nobody really won here because like Cheeto, it's like you're always gonna have those people that'd be like, well, did he really would he really have beaten him that night? And I guess that's the question we could still ask, but. Like, and then as far as the UFC too, it's like, well, same thing. It's like O'Malley, there's his first loss, whether he comes back or not, like it still does stop, the train for a little while with the recovery and everything like that. So at first I was like, oh, it's a lose. But now I look at it and I'm like, to me, it's like, I really don't feel like much changed because I'm like, I really don't think like as far as stock wise, I don't think O'Malley's stock changed anything. I don't think it went higher. I don't think it went lower. I don't know like how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too, because whenever he does come back, everyone's going to mention, like, even though he's coming off of his first loss due to this injury, you know what I'm saying? Everyone's going to say,
well, he's going to have the asterisk, next to his loss.
Oh, but what would have happened if his leg didn't give out on him? So I that's why it's not like he went out there and, went like Jose Aldo and got knocked out in 13 seconds. It wasn't anything devastating like that. It was the seriousness behind it. So I don't think his stock went down at all.
Yeah. So let's keep sticking with UFC 250 here. Obviously you had the main event, settled the trilogy. Everybody was talking about this fight. This was going to decide who was the best UFC heavyweight of all time. But let's talk about, more on a broader spectrum here too. Who is the greatest heavyweight of all time? Did Stipe Miocic, has he done enough to kind of get that? And we'll start with John.
Yeah, I'm going to go. Chael Sonnen always says whenever you talk about these types of things that people have recency bias. And I'm one of the people on this. And I'm going to go ahead and say that it is Stipe. I mean, first off, the UFC is the greatest mixed martial arts promotion anywhere. So the fact that he has, and this is recently too, not even like going back to the dark ages or anything like that, he already set the record for most title defenses. So then he loses to Daniel Cormier, which, I mean, Cormier is right up there for best heavyweight of all time, too, because the only person to ever beat him at heavyweight is Stipe. So he avenges that loss and then beats him again, for the trilogy to get up 2-1 on him. So, Yeah, I don't have a problem with saying that Stipe is the greatest of all time. I know there's going to be people saying that Fedor Emelianenko is probably up there, which is a very good pick, and I definitely, you want to debate that one. That's perfectly fine. I think that could definitely be up for discussion. But again, given what Stipe did and that he's done it so recent that it's right in the forefront of our mind where the sport's the best that it's ever been, I think you got to give him the tip of the hat there.
I mean, the argument is obviously Stipe or Fedor. And at one point, it seemed like it could have been Kane, and then Verdum stepped up, and then we saw him get gadooshed against Ngannou. So it was like, at one point, people were talking about him, not anymore. The issue for me is that right now, Stipe is sort of not in the prime necessarily of his career. Like, you can see it's a little bit of a drop-off. But, Fedor finished his career, like, so badly, in my opinion, that I know people are like, you have to compare prime versus prime, but, don't tell me what to do. For me, it's important how you finish your career. And same thing with Anderson Silva. Like, you lost to Dan Henderson, Bigfoot. I mean, Matt Mitrione, and that loss has aged really badly now when we've seen how Mitrione's been performing. So for me, Fedor finished it so bad that you might be able to argue it. But if Stipe can finish his career in style, like say he goes out there, beats John Jones and Francis and hangs it up, how can you not argue he's the GOAT? Like, he had a great start, great middle. Obviously some weird losses in there, but you can argue Junior Dos Santos, he won that. I think he slipped against Struve, which obviously that's a terrible loss. Like, on your record, like losing to Struve is as the GOAT, it's a really tough one. But yeah, for me, if Stipe can finish in style, it'd definitely be him. If he doesn't, if he has sort of some kind of weird Fedor decline, then it's going to get more even. But for me, just based on how Fedor finished his career, I have to agree with John. For me, it's Stipe or Stiopic with his immigrant mentality.
Yeah, and it's one more thing too on all those lines too. Is I think if Francis is indeed next, which is a whole different conversation in itself, which appears that it is. That's what Dana White's saying anyway. But he's obviously changed his mind several times in the past, and that's again whole different conversation there. But if Stipe does get by Francis for a second time, as Francis is just murdering everybody within 30 seconds, like consistently, like what his last 4 or 5 fights haven't been lasted a full round yet. So
yeah,
if he gets by him a second time. You can't deny it. Even if he does beat Francis and then loses to John Jones, people say John Jones is the greatest of all time. So what if you lose to the greatest of all time? But as far as a heavyweight standpoint, Stipe, especially if he beats Francis too. I think if he beats Francis this next time, if they do fight, it's going to be without a doubt, no questions asked, Stipe. And sorry, Connor, you should get an input on this too as we just continue.
Well, I was going to say that this is no fun because we're all agreeing on this one, But it's like literally, I mean, when you go third, I mean, I feel like you guys pretty much touched on it all. Like, I agree with like Lucas's point too, where I think like, when you're talking about the heavyweight of all time, that should be your entire career. Like, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, you're prime, but it's like, I don't think that should be the case too. Just like the same thing, like if you're going to put like Anderson Silva in the list of like top fighters too. It's like he's going kind of long now too. And you look at his last couple fights too, haven't been the best, but like with Fedor too, it's like, yeah, I think he went too long. And again, it's like, you're almost like, every time I feel like I see Fedor's schedule, I'd almost like cringe because I'm like, oh man, like don't do, like, I don't want to see him fight again. Like, I don't want to see him get hurt, like that kind of thing. So I definitely think Stipe's done enough. And like, one thing I do want to argue though, is like, I feel like a lot of people now, and you're seeing them kind of do this, and they're like, well, how could you put Stipe? They're like, if we think, Curtis Blades or like Ngannou and Jones like are capable of beating this guy. It's like, well, it's like you can't base your opinion on something that hasn't happened yet. Like, we're talking up to this point in time, and I think that guy gets construed. Where a lot of people are like, well, if we don't think he's the best heavyweight in the division, how could he be the best heavyweight of all time? But it's like, you have to think up to this point. Like, we can't judge it on things that haven't happened yet.
Yeah. And let's not forget, too, Stipe's 37 years old. So, I mean, there's a very good possibility that a Curtis Blades or even Francis Timmons, something like that could come in and beat him. And, it is what it is. In every sport, especially this one, too, ages, you don't age well in the sport of mixed martial arts 9 times out of 10. So a loss is definitely, at some point, the more Stipe goes, eventually he's going to get beat. And I'm sure if he does get beat, you might get an automatic rematch there somewhere, possibly. Again, you could lose it again, and then people start. That's where the chirping starts coming in there. But you got to take it for what it's worth. Is that given his body of work that he's done, it is what it is. He has the record for most title defenses, which I already said, and that speaks for itself right there. Nobody's defended that belt more times ever. So,
yeah. All right, I mean, this segues perfectly to our next one. Now, originally when we were going to do this question, I was going to say, how serious should we take John Jones? And I think it's actually funny because me and Lucas always do our show notes on Monday. This announcement about John Jones vacating his title came like, I mean, it might have been like seconds after we stopped talking, but I mean, it happened like right after. But so I think the question needs to be like, how soon does John Jones get that title? I mean, like everyone was saying, like we were saying before this, we said at the top of the show, everything White was saying was that Ngannou was going to be next. Is that still true? This time right now, do we think Ngannou's next?
Am I going first, or because I'm sure we all have a different opinion? I'll go first. Yeah. So, I guess the answer, technically, the question is yes, because Dana White said it after his fight, at the post-fight show on Saturday, and then he said it again on SportsCenter last night that Ngannou's next. The only problem is we've seen Dana change his mind several times, and for me though, so. Again, like I said, technically the answer is yes, but for me personally, I feel that John Jones should just jump everybody, and that's mainly due to the fact, and I've said this numerous times, like in all my Matchmaker Monday pieces that I write every Monday after fights, whenever like who should fight Stipe next has to come up, or something along, or Francis Ngannou, one of the top contenders. I always say John Jones skips the line. And how could you not? If you're going to say that John Jones is the greatest fighter of all time, which I'm pretty sure Dana said over whether it was on SportsCenter or if it was in his post fight, I forget which one, but if you're going to go ahead and say that this guy is the greatest fighter of all time, how do you not let him just come right in and jump over everybody? Don't get me wrong, Francis is 100% deserving, but I feel, especially in terms of pay-per-view numbers, John Jones moving up to heavyweight to fight the greatest heavyweight of all time is going to sell more. It's the hotter item than Stipe fighting a guy they already beat once.
For me, I mean, obviously, I agree with that. Like John Jones, if he were to get the next title shot, like, yeah, that makes sense. Are you the GOAT? Are you the champion? Like, yes. Here's the best case scenario for me, though. John Jones takes some time off, goes to, bulk like he said he would, spend some time in the gym, spend some time at the supplement store, bulking up on protein. We get Francis versus
legal protein. Remember what happened the last?
That's right. What is it? What's a generic muscle milk and like all the stuff that you can get at Walmart. There you go. Like Walmart can't have steroids.
If he wants to do this, maybe like the UFC PI should just like drive to Albuquerque, New Mexico, like once a month with this big bulk of just like protein supplements that they know are already legal and just give it to him. So this way he won't fail any drug test.
Right, and don't have him drive to Las Vegas to go there. Exactly. Yeah, no, that's. It's like, or take him and put him like in a crate on a helicopter and bring him to the Performance Institute and just don't let him leave. But for me, that would be for him to bulk. We get Francis versus Stipe, immigrant mentality from the two men. And then the winner faces John Jones. Like we've talked about Jones versus Ngannou. We've talked about Jones versus Stipe. For me, that's the best case scenario, right? Take the time to bulk up. Give us the title fight that everybody was promised. And then Jones can face the winner. And for me, I know GOAT versus GOAT could be interesting, but you're telling me you don't want to watch Jones versus Francis. Like for me, that's best case scenario where everybody gets what they want. We still get the super fight because for me, do not waste John on giving him like a Ben Rothwell. I know I'm throwing out like shitty name, but don't give us that weird contender fight where you're like, what are you doing with John? Save John, get him real big, get him real strong. Everybody's talking about his legs. Get them real big, real strong. And then just have him, fight the winner of that title fight. For me, that's best case scenario where, in my opinion, everybody wins. I hate waiting. Obviously, it's really shitty, but that would be the best case scenario for me.
Yeah. I see. I can't see in a world where like John Jones doesn't get it next. I think that's like the money fight. I think money talks. I see that. I mean, I do think as far as deserving, I think Francis should be first, but I mean, I feel like just a couple weeks ago, we were kind of talking about this as far as the bantamweights and flyweights. And I think I even said on the show with Dan Stupp that was on there, I was like, Cody Garbrandt, I was like, I don't think he should fight for the flyweight title. But I'm like, he probably will be next. And lo and behold, like, there we go. Like, that happened too. So, like, I think the big fights, like, talk. And I just see Jones I think he's going to probably skip the line, even if I don't think it should be true. And I think another thing they need to be a little careful too, the whole thing. I think a lot of people want to see Ngannou fight too. So I think like what Lucas is kind of saying, I think if Jones doesn't fight for that title, I think, yeah, like you should rest him. I don't think he should have any other fights. And I think if you're the UFC, you're probably best. I mean, really, I think it's a win-win at that point because like John said, if Stipe was to beat, I'm calling him Stipe. If Stipe was to beat Ngannou, it's, there you go. the best fighter in history versus the best heavyweight in history. And then the other thing, everyone wants to see that Ngannou fight with Jones. So I think it's a win-win for the UFC. If, I think it's a win-win either way for the UFC, but that wasn't the question. I do think John Jones is going to be first.
I hope he's first. I really do. I want to see that now. I don't want to. I'm okay with him sitting around and waiting and bulking up and everything. I guess really the question is, what does John Jones want to do? Which we don't have the answer to. If John Jones says, I want to fight Stipe next, screw Ngannou, I'm next, you do it. But how about this? What if this happens? Ready for this one? I'll just drop this ball on here. What if Brock Lesnar comes back and tries doing that?
Get out of here!
I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it either. I'm just saying though, you know exactly what's going to happen if he wants to come back. Because obviously John Jones and Brock went back before. I don't think it should happen. I think that's absolutely stupid and asinine. But if it happens, it's going to be a freaking circus. Like, you think Conor Mania is real? Imagine John Jones versus Brock Lesnar. You're going to have all the WWE fans going to be coming over, thinking that like steel chairs are involved and like,
gross.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's disgusting. I agree with that. 100% I agree with that. But I'm just saying, what if?
Yeah, we didn't even bring Brock's name up in the best heavyweight of all time, guys.
No, he's not in that. He is not in that conversation.
I thought you were going to tell us what if Joanna Jędrzejczyk bulked up to heavyweight, showed up, he came out of retirement.
Out of retirement? I actually would not mind seeing that, to be quite honest.
Good Lord. She'd look like a Roy Nelson or something, trying to make heavyweight like a female Mark Hunt. No, thank you.
And John would love her anyways.
Oh, it has to. You got to be loyal, man.
I will give her the cupcakes needed to bulk up.
There we go.
But that's pretty much it for the topics. John, thanks for joining us. Anything you want to say before we kind of close the show here?
No, just thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. Even though you guys gave me some very bad news that I somehow missed, and now I'm embarrassed that I made a complete horse's ass out of myself. But hey, whatever. Live TV is what it is. That's what it's made for. Moments like this. But if people want to give me a follow on Instagram, Twitter, it's at John Eric Poli. You'll be able to see whatever interviews I do. I'm it'll connect to my YouTube channel, which is also John Eric Poli as well. But I usually do a pretty good job of posting about my interviews on there. And thanks for having me on, guys. You guys do great work yourselves. And hopefully one day we'll all be doing this full time. And we'll be the big time guys one day.
Yeah. And I think it kind of comes full circle, too, because you talked about in the beginning of the show about, learning from things. So you learn from that Joanna experience there. So we're always learning here. How about you, Lucas?
No, go ahead, John. You got to come back for him, John. Give it to him.
No. I was going to say, you know what I learned today? I have finally became old enough that I cannot keep up with people's social media accounts. It happened. I knew one day it was going to be like, did you see this on Facebook or Instagram or here? I'm like, no, I didn't. Because normally it's like, oh, what do you mean did I see it? I saw it 2 days ago. Well, no, now apparently I'm about 4 or 5 weeks late to the party here.
And Lucas, any closing statements?
First of all, I'm sorry, John. I shouldn't have been the one to have dropped that news on you. That was not my place. But you got to do what you got to do. You come on the show. You enter the Deep Waters podcast. All right, listen, if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, you can at Grandsire MMA. Don't add me on Facebook. Definitely subscribe, YouTube, Lucas Grandsire. And if you're in charge of a big website, you have a budget, you're looking for a guy, right here, hire me.
All righty, and you guys can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, Deep Water MMA Podcast on both platforms. Also on Twitter at MMA_deep. My personal Twitter is CNorthrup732. And that's pretty much it. Thanks to MyMMANews and Eric Colwell for helping this. And you can see the MyMMANews and John's screen there. So repping well, I have to say. And a lot of action this weekend. We obviously have Bellator, which we talked about. But we didn't talk much about this weekend. We got another UFC event. Say what you want about the card, but I think the main event is intriguing enough. I mean, you got Edgar making that bantamweight debut, and I think it's crazy when you think about Edgar too. I mean, I don't want to go on a whole tangent here, but I think it's crazy just because it's not even like he fought. He was a champion at featherweight. This guy was a champion at lightweight, 2 weight classes up, and yet here he is, probably his more natural weight class, but fighting at bantamweight. So I'm interested to see that in Pedro Munoz too, who pretty tough out. So guys, enjoy the fights. Thanks, John, for joining us again. Oh, and one more thing, Lucas, since he's gonna be moving back to the States, and I'm actually going to be on vacation next week, where it's our first week off, I guess you could say, after 9 straight weeks here grinding. So we will not have a show next week, but we'll be back, and hopefully we'll have another great guest for you. So once again, everyone, thank you. Enjoy the fights, and we'll see you not next week, the week after, 2 weeks.